Trying to decide whether that new game is worth your $60? Or maybe you're just wondering if an old game is worth your time? Well, you came to the right place. This is the only podcast that tries to answer the question,
should I buy it though?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Should I Buy It Though? I am son of the underworld, Jagrius. Giancarlo Gagrius. Nope.
Whoa!
No,
More like Giancarlo, no Gagrius. Hey, anyway,
You can't take it back.
TJ Barry, god of music.
I'm Amanda Ficasa, and I'm really upset. I didn't think of anything clever this week, but I'm actually upset that I didn't think of anything clever this time. I want to be Thanatos.
God of beauty.
No, let's be real.
And
TJ,
aggression.
Don't lie. I'll be God of Death. I think that makes the
God
most
of
sense.
aggression.
I'm Nick Palazius, God of Gods.
Ooh.
And this week we have a very special guest with us. We have Tozaman.
God of
Welcome
daddies.
to the show.
Hey, I'm Tozaman. I'm your deity of gay shit.
More like gaiety. Anyway.
All right. And this week we are talking about Hades, the new roguelike game from Supergiant Studios. That's correct, right? Supergiant?
Yes, Supergiant
Okay,
Games.
cool. I got it wrong in our 24-hour impressions. I could not remember it for the life of me, but here we are. We're super excited to talk about this game this week. For context, I played the game. I played it on Switch. I have now completed the game 3 times, so I technically haven't reached that, true ending. But I've made my way through the entirety of what the game has to offer, technically speaking.
I also played the game. I streamed it live. So if you watched it, you experienced it with me. And I have just under 40 hours on that game. We did not get the true ending yet, but we've made it there twice. And we're going to do it eventually. And I can't wait.
I have not played the game, but I really like Percy Jackson.
Yes.
Cool. I've made it to the end once. I will get to the true ending. I will. It's not going to be today. It'll be in the future, but I'm going to get there. Yeah.
And I've heard about it in passing. I think it's pretty fun. I think I'd like to get into it. I downloaded it recently. I think I have 140 hours on it. I'm still sinking my feet in. Well, I actually don't want to jump too far ahead, but I actually do want to give one piece of advice, which is I got psyched out by this, is that when you think you get the true ending, you'll see the credits roll and you'll be like, oh, great, I got the true ending. And I'm just letting you know, please keep playing it because there's a true ending. That
Okay,
Dun, dun,
great.
dun.
so just you're gonna think you're done with it, but there is definitely more that happens. So make sure you
Good to know.
keep playing.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
So
good to
I
know.
think it's safe to say that the Doctor of Hades for this week's episode is absolutely our very special guest, Tozaman.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had Mr. Palazzo for Undertale, and we had Benetatos for BioShock. We've now outsourced our doctorates because we needed a specialist.
Okay,
But-
well, can I tell you all how weird it is hearing your voices on this? Because I was listening I was thinking, okay, I should do some research on Should I Buy It Though, and listen to an episode and see how it goes. And then the first and only one I put on was the Control one with Jan, and everybody was speaking with this deep urban Latinx accent, and I was like, am I gonna have to do this? I don't want to do this. So then I thought that was gonna be a bit that maybe happens for the entire podcast.
We were in an
almost
experimentation
was.
phase.
Okay.
We were still figuring out what it is that we wanted, which path we wanted to go with Should I Buy, and decisions were made. Were they right? Were they wrong?
Who knows?
To say?
I was just like, I didn't like that was the only one I'd heard, so I didn't know if that was like a one-off or like we were going to be doing that. Anyway, it's
No,
great to
pretty
hear.
much every other episode is like this.
Okay, great.
I should bring that back for Halloween. Anyway.
I agree.
We'll see.
Yeah, it was pretty scary.
Yeah, it was,
But yeah, I am super, super excited to be your resident Hades expert. Without spoiling anything, please pick my brain for anything I can offer y'all on this game, because I've put a little time into it, and I think it's like probably game of the year. So
Ooh.
It's up there for sure. I agree.
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. So I think a simple place to start, and TJ, please, if you have questions at any point from an outside perspective, please feel free to ask. But I think a decent place to start, just if you didn't listen to like our Spelunky review, because apparently this is not in everyone's vocabulary, is defining roguelike and kind of the elements that you can expect in this game. Basically, all this means is that you're expected to complete the game in a single sitting. If you die, and granted there are like things in this game like death-defying feats and stuff like that, but once you die, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. There's not really checkpoints, and you're expected to complete runs in that fashion. This is very different from something like Spelunky, though, because Spelunky is kind of this 2D like platformer, whereas this is more of a dungeon crawler-esque type thing. And yeah, I don't know, like I'm just curious to if you guys had to explain this to someone, you know, who is not well versed in games or anything. What are like the highlights of this game? What do you think are its defining traits, I guess?
The style. I wanted to have sex with
Greek.
everything.
Yikes.
It's all Greek to me. That's
Yeah.
what it is. And also what Palazzo said.
I think
Not just
it's-
the. Go ahead, Toe. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I'm trying to think of how to describe it, and I think when people ask me about games or I try to explain them, I think it's helpful to kind of talk about it in terms of like what's the core gameplay loop, right? So like what is like basically like the dopamine cycle, like what is the thing you do repeatedly that like brings you enjoyment for like the majority of the game, right? So I guess like I would characterize it as a roguelite action RPG / dating sim, sort of, right? So
Fair.
there's like kind of that like core gameplay loop of like you do the roguelite action RPG gaming segment, and then that's kind of punctuated by these like interludes where you interact with the various NPCs throughout the underworld, and that's kind of like the social simulator that goes into it. So that's how I would probably break it down and explain it to people. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
And you bring up one of my favorite elements of the game, which is kind of the almost dating sim-esque mechanics that are in there. As someone who, it's been no secret throughout all of Should I Buy It, though, I very much enjoy like a good narrative. For me, something like replayability in and of like being able to play the same levels over and over again does not rank as highly on my priorities when I'm looking for like media, as far as having like a solid core experience. And I think this game does a really good job of kind of taking people whose interests might line up more in my territory on that front, and stringing those aspects of like of a cool narrative with these awesome characters and developing it in bits so that you are encouraged to continue through the gameplay, even after you might think you're done. Like maybe, you know, you beat the final boss and you're like, I don't care so much about the other ending. But you will, because there is that, you know, the narrative thread as well as the side plots with a bunch of characters who you interact with literally just one conversation at a time every single time you go through. And sometimes they're not even there. So like you're dying to see the next bit of the story and the character's just not there. And you have to wait until you see him next.
I thought that was one of the coolest things about this game. Like, not just that it's a roguelike that has a narrative. By the way, this is my first roguelike, so I really have nothing to compare it to. But anyway, it has a narrative, but every time you die and go back to the beginning, rinse and repeat all that stuff, so far for me, every little bit of dialogue is different. Like, you're experiencing something new every single time you go through it, and that is super impressive. Like, I don't even think I've played another game. Like, there's been other games where there hasn't been a lot of dialogue repeated, but eventually you get the same stuff. In this, I've played God knows how many hours, and I have yet to see a repeat of anything. It's amazing. It really is.
No, same here. This was also my first roguelike, and I thought I was going to hate it, I was so wrong. But I think the fact that every time you die and you go back and there's more to discover within the narrative is just part of the game's like brilliance, because it just it helped the fact that I knew I was going to die a lot, especially it being my first roguelike and I'm more of a casual gamer. So, but knowing that I was going to start from the beginning but get so much more to this hefty, chunky, delicious story, I was totally okay with dying. For the most part.
Yeah. I think, like, maybe for people who, like, aren't familiar with the narrative or haven't played the game, maybe we should explain, like, what the premise is.
Yeah.
Sure. So...
okay, I mean, I can do it. Or,
go
okay,
ahead.
no,
I don't
go
know
for it.
anybody. I don't know.
Nose game, so...
Nose goes.
I'll take it.
Okay, great.
I mean, sure, I guess.
So very simply, you play as Zagreus, son of Hades, and you are attempting to escape from the underworld. And so you are working through the different layers. There are 3 sections. You start in Tartarus, and you work your way up, and you encounter all manner of different characters from Greek mythology as you attempt to escape. And the main hook is kind of that you are trying to discover something about your mother. You, without trying to give too much away, your father has essentially been keeping something from you, and to discover the truth, you are trying to get out of the underworld to go see what lies beyond. And your father is vehemently against that, sending all manner of things to kill you, and they often will. I think that's basically the core narrative, but then it gets more complex as you go, as well as all these side narratives featuring, you know, other characters from mythology that I know I got excited when I ran into quite a few of them, and then discovering that some of them had like shared links across the different layers of the underworld that you can kind of, you act as like a messenger between the two of them. I think it's a really, really unique way to incentivize that exploration and to get you excited about the next chamber when you're like, oh, that's that person. I'm going to go see that person now. I get to go find out. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, does that sound fair?
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation of it.
Cool.
Yeah. I love it.
So I mean, what is it for you guys that like kind of really draws you in or makes you want to play it so many times?
Go ahead, Amanda.
For me, it's definitely, I mean, it's the Greek mythology. I think for me, it's the story. I love Greek mythology. But like TJ said at the beginning, when I was in middle school, I was super into Percy Jackson, and I ate that series up. During quarantine, I revisited it, and I was like, maybe it's actually not as, which, I mean, it's, you know, YA, but I went back into it, and I finished it again super quick, and I was crying over it, and I just felt so much, and I just love it. So getting to kind of revisit it again within Hades and just see all these characters that I've come to like know, and even though like they're gods, and I don't know, it was just really cool. It was really neat, and I don't know, it keeps me coming back for more and more, and I want to see these relationships develop, especially with Zagreus, because he's kind of like a lesser god compared to like everyone else in the story. So it's like he's like discovering these gods and stuff, and you're like, Zag, like, yes, like obviously. And you discover, I know that the 2 characters that John was talking about, and he's like, he knows nothing about like those 2 characters' relationship. I'm like, dude, how do you not know the relationship between these characters? Like everybody does. But then I'm like, Amanda, it's literally a game, calm down. But that's what keeps me coming back.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the things we haven't mentioned yet is that part of this gameplay is that you're getting these power-ups from Greek deities, so that's kind of your main way of interfacing with them. So like for me, one of the things that was most compelling about it is that you get to like meet all your like favorite like deities from like Greek mythology, but also they're just as like temperamental and just as kind of petty as like Greek deities are. So sometimes they will like work against you, or very often they will work against you. Sometimes they'll like give much better boons to like your enemy, which I find very like annoying. So I think just like, but it was also, but you know, those deities are also all your extended family. So I found it to be just kind of like a really interesting meditation on like family relationships and like how they're sometimes toxic and sometimes complicated. And without going too much into the ending, I think it gives like a really beautiful like exploration of like what the potential for those relationships are, no matter like how close or distant they might be. I think just like it's the game for 2020, right? It's like a game where you're like in hell all the time and you're like trying to get out of it. And like every time you try to leave, you just kind of get like killed and you have to start from ground zero. But I think the central message of it is that the relationships you build along the way are still gratifying, even if you don't succeed, right?
Yeah, that's very, very well put. And on a narrative front, I mean, absolutely, that's one of the things that kept me hooked. And I found myself surprised at how often I returned to this game, even when I wanted to put it down. Like it was hard to, despite like playing on the Switch, like thumb pain for days now. I can't like it's not a pleasant experience at this point. But there is just something so incredibly compelling, both gameplay loop wise. I think it does. It strikes that balance where I think this is what puts it more in the roguelite genre as opposed to the, roguelike. I still have trouble distinguishing between the two. But the fact that you are continually getting these, while the boons that you get throughout your run are unique and you're going to have different builds each time around, you do have certain upgrades that will carry over and make you stronger each time. And so one of the things about the game is that it certainly kind of relishes in the fact that, you're going to die a lot, like a lot of these games do. But it's also, like, weirdly encouraging and supportive in being like, hey, you made it farther. And the characters in the game will tell you that. They're like, I believe in you. Like, you did really good. Oh, I heard you fought that guy. Yeah, that's a nasty fight, but you got it. You got it. And you almost don't expect it from, like, the presentation. Like, I expect a darker game. And the relationships, kind of like you were saying, where even though you are failing, it's kind of like these relationships are... still make that journey worth it, and in turn are kind of feeding back into your progress and your eventual successes, because as you develop these relationships, you get rewarded for it as well, in turn making you stronger. So it is this kind of a really great gameplay loop between all of these different aspects that kind of link together in subtle ways that you might not expect at first, to the point where like you will likely neglect some of the like most powerful aspects of the game at the beginning, just because you don't expect it to be as deep as it is. Or at least on my end, that's how I found myself interfacing with it. And then I was like, oh, time to catch up. Hey, buddy.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, one of the most endearing connections I made to the game was through the main character, Zagreus, because his progression through the story and the relationships that he develops along the way sort of, in a way, kind of mirrors what the player may be wanting him to say or how they're feeling at a certain time, I think, especially with how he interacts with a lot of people in the main house of Hades, and the ways that he helps people in between runs, and just like his dialogue changes throughout each run, because the further and further you get in the game, the more and more like sometimes frustrated he gets. There's times he's like, oh, fuck this boss, all right, let's get it over with, move on, because he's been through this 50 times just like you have. Mm-hmm. And that sort of connection that you have with the main character, I think really helped out this game a lot, because he may be one of my favorite characters I've seen throughout the whole year in terms of games. I loved him, and that made me love the game even more.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think one of the things that struck me as like really uncanny about the game is like how eerily on point the writing is, like in terms of like emulating like what the players' thoughts and feelings might be. Like there were so many times where I would think like, okay, well, isn't this a plot hole, or isn't this like a thing that shouldn't happen? And then the immediate next interaction I would have with an NPC is them being like, I bet you were wondering about this plot hole, and I have an explanation for it. It's just very intelligently spaced out. And I think the thing that really sets it apart from a lot of other games is, I think, a lot of other games, like particularly in this time that we're living in, like really relish in how punishing they are. Like I think of like Dark Souls, for instance, or even like Darkest Dungeon. Like I think those games like think like every time it beats you that like it has to kind of like rub it in a little bit, whereas I feel like this game is like really lovingly written in that it's like, yeah, like you were mentioning, John, like all the characters are encouraging, but I mean, this isn't spoiling anything major. It's like one tiny interaction, but like later on in the game, like after you've like beaten it a bunch of times, a character who gives you a lot of the power-ups that you get that carry over from run to run, she goes, by the way, that was just to like encourage you. You're actually powerful without those. Why don't you try turning off all those power-ups and running it again and seeing how you do? And then, so I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do it by like turning off like all the Mirror of Night talents, but I turned off all the Mirror of Night talents, and then I like went to go fight the bosses again, and then the bosses would comment on the fact that I had turned off those upgrades, and they'd be like, hey, now this is a fair fight again. So I think it's like there are so many conditions upon which like certain pieces of dialogue come into play, and the fact that there is like a new one every single room I go into out of like 60 rooms per run is just like mind-boggling. Like I think of like we all make podcasts here, or most of us like work in audio. Like we know how painstaking it is to get like one good line of audio, and I just think of how they have like thousands upon thousands in this game, like by an indie studio. I mean indie-ish, right? So yeah, that was like really just like mind-boggling for me.
Absolutely, and that was kind of the next thing that I wanted to touch on in that vein was kind of like what Palazzo was saying, and also playing back into what Toe was saying, with the way that it is reactive to your run and kind of reflective of what you're thinking as an individual. It shows just the absurd amount of effort they had to put into this game, because you have your interactions with all of the gods. Like, I love, getting a visit from my Uncle Poseidon. He always brings me some nice gifts. It's great. But then, like, in a different run, if you just don't find him for a while and then you get to him, I'm like, oh, Uncle Poseidon, give me a gift. And he, like, snarks you. He's like, oh, yeah, you've been getting gifts from Zeus? Okay, yeah, that's fine. Sure. And stuff like that, along with the fact that something I'm curious about, I could have sworn, watching some of Amanda's streams, we had very different interactions with characters.
Yes.
Like, she was interacting with some of the side plots, I guess, for lack of a better word, and they seemed way more aggressive with her than they were with me.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm curious if this is like a known, like, are there different, like, pathways for these stories? I feel like in the end they shook out the same, but based on, like, because there are different, conditions in order to meet someone, and it being randomly generated, you could go a while without, like, interacting with people. I'm curious if, like, for initial triggering conversations, if they have different variations based on where you're at, because that seemed to be the case from what I saw, unless my brain is making stuff up. I'm just curious if anyone else had, like, different experiences. Like, I know, Palazzo, you watched some of the streams as well. If anything seemed, like, starkly different to you.
I mean, I just remember you telling me about one specific interaction with the character, and you're like, oh, it was so, like, pleasant, whatever. I was like, I didn't get that reaction at all. She was actually very upset. She was not happy. I don't understand. What did I do wrong?
It's definitely possible to kind of change the nature of the relationship you have with certain characters, at least to some degree. Like, particularly, like, with the romantic options, like, it will tell you, like, oh, do you want to, like, hook up with this person? And then they'll, in parentheses afterwards, it'll be like, also, it's okay if you don't want to. They'll be fine. Like, I think that's, like, really sweet that, like, it kind of really lets you, like, pretty much all types of people insert themselves in a way that they feel comfortable, which you don't often see. I mean, I do have criticisms of it. I think, like, again, just because of the way that the game is made, like, the relationship system feels very, like, vending machine-esque, right? Yes. Where it's like you pump people full of nectars and eventually they love you, right? And it's like, wouldn't that be nice if I could, like, do that in the real world, right? But to kind of go back to Amanda and John's point, I agree that, like, it's definitely there's definitely a high variation between the way characters interact with you initially, because I know, like, I had played about 50 hours of Hades and still had not met Thanatos, and everybody was talking about Thanatos, and, like, I had not met him, like, once ever, and I don't think I had met him until I had, like, beaten the game, like, a couple of times, and then I finally met him, and then I was like, oh, okay, everybody who was talking about this one character, like, I didn't meet until, like, much later. So I think it's probably random.
Yeah, for sure, because I was on stream and same thing. I was like, I still haven't met Thanatos. Like, why? I want to meet Thanatos. Everyone's talking about Thanatos. And then eventually Thanatos popped up, and I was really happy. So,
what do you think is the appeal with him?
You know,
is it that his lats could cut a diamond? Because that's what the appeal is for me.
I just remember, like, I had no idea Thanatos was going to be in the game. But I was on Twitter, and I had seen, like, fan art, and it was Thanatos and Zagreus, and I was like, oh, but I opened it, I'm like, oh, they're, like, making out. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I can see this. I mean, for sure, like, okay. But I still hadn't met Thanatos. But then I started to think about it, and I'm like, I mean, their mom, who they thought was their mom, isn't their mom, so they're not related. But at the same time, they're Greek, so...
Yeah, like, them being related is a non-issue.
Like, they weren't gonna care anyway. Yeah. But I just... Also, like, the dialogue between them, I don't know if it's because I saw, like, that picture and I saw posts about them, and I'm like, ooh, like, they're gonna ooh... Or if it's because, like, the dialogue between them is actually kind of like, oh, this is a little spicy. You know what I mean? Because I can also get that feeling between, like, Zag and Meg.
I was gonna say, because like maybe it's just because I hadn't seen any of that fan art, but I did not read into the relationship with Thanatos like that at all. I was just like, my brother, oh, this is so sweet. I was like, helping me kill people, having friendly competitions. How wonderful.
I don't know.
But I that also just goes to show, like, the different pathways that you can take with the game. But also, I do see, like, the frustrations as well with the transactional nature and also the random nature of it as well, because I have characters who have been waiting to develop my relationship with that I have not seen in, like, 15 runs. I'm like, you're just not here ever. I can't talk to you. Maybe it's just trying to emulate life, but...
I think that's, like, where the kind of what they're trying to do with the story and what they're trying to do with the gameplay doesn't quite meet up perfectly, because there's a whole nother aspect that we'll probably get into soon about the gameplay and choices that you make there and how you strategize on each run, that you totally, at a certain point, at least for me, forget about all the story stuff. Like, in the beginning, I might be making a choice between two different gods because, oh, I like Poseidon better than Zeus. But down the road, it's like, fuck that. Where's Ares? I need him now, you know? And it's a whole different mental process ball game, which is cool in a way. The game's making me think three-dimensionally, I guess. But there's a whole lot of thought that goes into progressing through this game. It's crazy.
Like, I had a question actually regarding that. I'm not sure if any of us have the answer, but it was on stream today where I was met having to pick between Ares or Poseidon. And I remember another occurrence that I had to pick between Ares and Athena. So originally I had picked Athena over Ares, had to do the little fight, and then Ares was like, oh, here you go. So whatever. But then this time I was like, if I choose Poseidon, is Ares going to be, like, extra mad at me because I didn't pick him twice?
He won't be.
Or, okay, because I was like, is this like an Undertale? Is it, like, fully aware of what's going on?
They will remark on it, like if you you know, spurn Demeter, like, multiple times, she'll be like, oh my god, do you hate me? But, like, the actual like mechanical, like, aspect of it doesn't get, like, materially worse.
The only time I don't remember if we've had this chat yet.
Yeah.
But going against me is, like, not in your best interest, dude.
The only time it does is when you get to those specific rooms where it's, like, literally pick between two gods, and you will piss the other one off.
Yeah, I think that's what you're talking about, right?
That's what we're referring to, but if you do it continually, if it like, pisses them off
down the road, you mean? No, just in that room. Okay, I got you. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, the way the game kind of works is you're clearing a dungeon or room, and then at the end of that dungeon, you're either just progressing through one door, or you have to choose between one or another door, and they present different rewards. So you're kind of branching off to different paths there. Like, oh, do I want health at this point, or do I want attack power? And that's sort of how the game goes on through different areas. I think there's 3 or 4 total major areas in the game, and you're just progressing, trying to get as far as you can.
Yeah. I'm curious on the front of gameplay, because something that the game has a couple of mechanics in place to try to incentivize variation, because there are so many different builds that you can take and approach with this game. because you have a number of weapons and charms and power-ups and all these things at your disposal. And I'm curious if the mechanics that were in place, like for example, there are special rewards that you get for defeating a boss with a weapon that you can really only get on the first time that you do it with each new particular weapon. Things like that. Did you find yourselves chasing those incentives, or did you find yourselves kind of like pigeonholing yourself further and further into like a specific build?
Absolutely chasing like the variety, because so one of the ways the game encourages you to do that is with something called the fated list of minor prophecies. Yes. And like a lot of the achievements give you like really, really nice rewards. And like a lot of the achievements will be like, use every single one of like the duo boons from like all of the gods, and there's like 17 different duo boons or whatever, and like you need to get extremely specific abilities from multiple gods and combine them, and then you have a chance of unlocking the special duo ability or legendary ability. Yep. And then you have to get that for every god, and then if you do that you get like 15 like ambrosia or titan's blood or whatever. So I was always like, for me particularly, like knowing, okay, I'm gonna die anyway, yeah, I'm definitely gonna chase like the highest variety of things, and like I built really suboptimally for a very long time, until I got like every achievement, because I wanted to kind of just like get every reward and then put those into like my weapons that I wanted to work on.
For me, I think for the beginning of the game until I got my first win, it was definitely just find the one thing that works the best and stick with it. I think that was just my Dark Souls brain not really translating to this game, because I usually just put all your points into strength, find the one weapon that works, and beat the game. But then after a while, like the first time I got through the whole run, I'm like, that was awful. It was very slow. I kind of pigeonholed myself to this one thing. There was no variety there. So ever since I did that one run, I've been trying different weapons, different combinations of the boons, all that different stuff, and I've had a lot more fun on my consecutive runs through the game. So I highly recommend going that way. Try to see everything you can in this game. Try all different methods. If you find something that works for you, great, because you can have fun that way too. But I definitely say try all different combinations of things and see what works.
Hold on. So you mentioned different weapons. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I think this group has some strong opinions on certain weapons.
I was about to say.
Just pick the shield, because that's all you need.
The spear is the best.
Oh my god,
weapon.
twin fists.
No, okay, hold on.
The twin fists? Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
It has not taken me over 2 minutes to defeat the second boss in like years, just because of the spear. I get through encounters so quick.
It's so interesting because we had this conversation, and you posted on Twitter, and literally all the responses to that one tweet were different. So I think that's really funny. But although I did stick, as soon as I got the shield, and I stuck with it, I'm still with Aegis. Like, I've completed 2 out of the 10 that I whatever for, you know, with Aegis, and I'm happy. Like, we are together, and we are chef's kiss, okay? But I do like, you know, to change it up. I'll spice it up a little bit, and I went ahead and I tried your little spear or whatever, and I couldn't get past Asphodel, because I got past Meg with it, yes. But good God, and then I was like, look, Toe said the fists, let's try the fists, and I did. And I couldn't get past Meg. And I was like, I'm so sad. Like, what is going on? And I tried it for a bit because I'm like, okay, obviously, first run, I gotta get used to it. And it's just, I don't know. I don't know. It's like,
for me with the weapons, I'm thinking long term, because I would love to blaze through the whole game in 2 seconds. But I'm always thinking about the very final fight. There's a few moves in that final fight where I'm like, I don't know how I could possibly get through this alive without the shield. Baby. Exactly, deflect, which is why I use the shield. So until I figure out a way to get through the game, or I upgrade the spear more, the sword more, I think the shield might be the only way I could beat it. But I am still willing to learn more methods.
My
Agreed.
pro tip for the game in general is, as soon as you can get a deflect that is attached to your dash, get it and never stop dashing, and nothing can hit you. Ever.
It's true.
I am pressing B 75% of the time I spend in the game to dash. But to everyone else's credit, after I made that tweet and got my responses, I have now played through the game all the way until the final boss with every single weapon. But the only weapon I've been able to use to actually defeat the boss has been the spear. Right now.
Crazy.
So very quickly for
shield.
folks who are not familiar with the game or don't play, what we're talking about is that like there are certain weapons you can choose that kind of control or rather really shape the rest of your run and what builds you build around it. So you have a sword, you have a spear, you have a shield, a bow, a pair of giant knuckles, or a machine gun. So those are the options we're talking about. And I think just a lot of the fun of talking about Hades comes around to what weapon choices people use, because I think we talk about them a little almost as if they have like this like heuristic quality, like they say something about you, right? So like no offense, when I hear people like love the bow or the spear, I'm like, oh, those like talentless casuals. They just like don't want to like learn the mechanics. They just want to like stand a million miles away and just like spam one button.
You're not
Whereas
wrong.
like I pride myself on like learning the fist, because it's like, okay, you got to be up close and personal, and like every boss you got to know all their moves to like dash away at the perfect time. And also it's like, I think that there's just like something very satisfying about like punching your way through hell. Like that just sounds very like what I would want to do. But also it's like, I don't know. I play like a monk in every game possible, as folks who listen to Drimbus might know. But I think like there's like the fists alone have like very low damage attached to them, and I think one of the things that's like really gratifying for me in games is like kind of pushing the logical limits of like underpowered things. So like for me, for fists, I was like, okay, these things have low damage, so I don't want to like increase the stats on the damage because it's going to scale like very slowly. So instead I want to go for like additional damage with like Ares is like Doom, or like Dionysus is Poison, because that's like extra additional damage that I can scale instead of like my weak base damage. Like that's like super nerdy like mathematical stuff, but that stuff is like really gratifying for me as a gamer. So that I think
absolutely
different play styles. I think it can appeal to different play styles in a way that a lot of games might not necessarily.
I think for me, my only thought process was the shield worked in Kingdom Hearts, so therefore I'll try it in this. And I won.
I always like threw away the shield in Kingdom Hearts.
What?
I was like, always take the wand, always throw away the shield.
You don't throw away the shield.
Oh, it just gives you HP, right?
No, defense.
Yeah, who needs that? Just don't get hit.
And you get scanned early. Toe, you're coming back for the Kingdom Hearts review. You're coming back.
Oh my goodness, the number of times I've wanted to be like on any Kingdom Hearts podcast. I've tried to make this happen with Forge so many times. I'm like, can we please just do a Kingdom Hearts podcast?
Toe's coming on.
We will make it happen.
Come through.
We are officially doing it, and I know myself and Amanda have never played it.
I've played it a long time ago.
Okay,
Only one.
never mind. I speak for myself.
But
I have never played it.
Fair. But I also feel like four of us have been talking about Hades a lot, and I would like love to get like a perspective from somebody who's like maybe hearing about it more recently or hasn't played it yet.
I mean, like, it sounds cool. Watching Amanda play, like, it looks like something I'd enjoy and be fun to. I think I would also like probably be one of those people that try to get up in there with the knuckles, just because like punching stuff is just fun in general. And like every game I play, I love being that character that like gets into the fray and usually gets messed up because of it. Needs healing.
Did you have any impressions of like the different deities that you saw?
Not really. Like, I was just watching. I was
just like so immediately enamored with them. I didn't know if that was the case.
Yeah, like I just thought it was interesting, like the takes on the different deities they put into the game and just like how they represented them in general. Just because like in my head and like media, they're like one way, and then you see them in game, and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I like this guy.
What way would you say you see them in media versus like how they're portrayed in the game?
I mean, like. Well, mostly like just like Percy Jackson, or like a lot of times you'll see them they're always like hoity-toity or like standoffish, and like the other ones they're all just like, oh, you're humans or whatever, like go do whatever you want. Or like in anime they're always just like, oh, you peons. But like in this one they're all little like family. They're like, nephew, what's good, like let me help you out, like cousin, like
I mean, I hope it's not like super off-color dimension. I feel like my media portrayal of all of them that I've seen is that they're always white, right?
That is also that they are. That's true.
So for me, it was like really refreshing because I feel like there's this idea we have like from all the like white statues we see, which were actually like bronze statues that became white over time. But because they're white now, everybody kind of like perceives them as white. So I really liked how they tried to diversify them. So we have like the very first deity you meet is like Athena, essentially, and so she's a black woman, and then we have Hermes, who I read is like East Asian, and then we have, I mean, Aphrodite could be like white passing, like Latina, maybe. I don't know. I thought she was like maybe potentially like PSA, and then were there other ones? I feel like there were more, but I feel like that was like diversified. Maybe it wasn't as diversified as I thought.
Patroclus.
Oh, I say Patroclus. Yeah, that's true. I liked him a lot too. So I really appreciated that they diversified the pantheon, and I know that they've been getting like a lot of like praise for that. I guess like maybe I'm like a little bit too critical, or like I always like demand too much, because like for me, I felt like for me, I was like, really, like this was as far as they could go with the diversity of it. Like why couldn't, like, would it kill a deity to be fat? Like why are these all like super ripped deities? You know, like they're literally all powerful. They can do whatever they want, but they all have to like work out like every hour of the day, right? So it's like there were like little things, or like, you know, like why, like how powerful would it be to like have like a disability portrayal for like a deity, right? Like I think that would just be like so interesting, right? So I think that there were like a lot of like squandered opportunities. Like I feel like with like the latest like push we have for like diverse representation, I feel like there's this kind of like barrier where people like really like diverse representation as long as like the majority is still like very normatively attractive.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would have liked for the game to challenge that more, but like, I mean, again, this is like I think it speaks to how good Hades is, that like this is the level of like criticism that I can have.
There was one moment in particular that kind of touched me in terms of like inclusion and accepting others. It was a dialogue option between Zagreus and Dusa, who is the floating Medusa head in the main base lobby. She pretty much has a huge crush on Zagreus, adores him, and Zagreus is kind of playing nice guy, like, oh yeah, cool, Dusa. And it is such an easy, low-hanging fruit thing to do, to be like, oh yeah, here's this hot protagonist that is kind of like skirting off the nerdy sort of character. But there was a moment where she kind of musters up the courage to ask him for drinks, to go out, essentially, and he's like, oh yeah, sure, that'd be nice, let's go get drinks sometime, sort of as like a, I don't know, do you guys kind of get where I'm going?
Yeah,
with that?
I totally see what you're saying. Like he's almost like too, like he's like an ubermensch of sorts, right? Like he's extremely good at everything, and he's super nice. Like
right, and
like even from the beginning with Dusa, I thought like that relationship was always just so sweet. I was just like, I wanted to talk to Dusa more. I'm like, Dusa, no, come back. I want to talk to you. You're so cute. So
it's funny. I haven't had the interaction Palaz is talking about.
Oh,
it's super subtle and super nice, and I don't know why it got me, but I'm like, they don't do this often enough in other forms of media. Just that slight connection. I don't know.
Yeah, I found it really tender. I identify with Dusa the most, I think, because like I think if I was in the House of Hades, like I would be her, right? Just like cleaning and just like marveling at everybody else, being like, "Oh my god, you're so cool." So like I really liked her a lot, and I think. Yeah. Without, again, I don't think this is a spoiler, but just like I think she clearly sees the other relationships that Zagreus builds, and like has kind of a certain envy around like not having a body with which she could interact with Zagreus, and like she's literally a floating head. So I thought that was like really like a sweet conflict that they like, you know, explore interestingly.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like you said, it does kind of speak to the quality of the game, to where, you know, when we're talking about our gripes with it.
Yeah, these are the gripes that you can have.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, oh, it's there's not enough, as opposed to, you know, being like, as opposed to having it completely whitewashed, or, you know, something along those lines.
Can we Can we talk about, for me, this was the main draw of what hooked me to this game. Just the style in general. And I don't mean the art style. Like, that goes into it, but the style of the art, all the little details they put into it, the style, the voice acting and the music, the way that the weapons even felt, all that combined together just gave me this experience where I'm like, this game made edgelord like a positive, sexy term, you know, instead of this negative connotation. All the voice actors, I wanted to like bottle up their voices, and when I took a shower, just like spread it all over me.
Literally the first stream, like Palazzo was just commenting in the chat, and he was like, his voice does things to me, like, whoa. And I was like,
it's literally Darren Korb. He's the composer for like all the music.
Oh, exactly. I was like, amazing, phenomenal performance.
Looking at all the images, kind of like JoJo's
He liked
Bizarre
my tweet
Adventure.
once, and now we're married, but he doesn't know it. I completely agree with you. I think Supergiant Games is like known for having this polish that's just like so slick. Like the game is just so sexy, and like not even in like a sexual way. Like it's just so like it's just oozing with like style, and like the only like kind of comparison I can make is like Persona 5. I don't know if y'all have played it, but just like the way like every like menu screen opens up, like the way like it feels to like press every button, like every sound effect like is very deliberately designed to make you feel awesome.
Everything just attacks your eyes and your ears.
Yeah, and it's really what I aspire to do, like with my own art, or like when I make my own podcast. It's like I want to like dive into like that level of detail. It's just like I want everything to sound like this sexy, but like again, not even in a sexual way. Just like I can't think of another word for it.
Yeah.
No, I totally get what you mean.
It's the perfect word. I understand exactly what you mean. Just on a personal note, I've caught myself increasingly over time, just when something is really good, I just go, hot. So I look at this game, you open, like you said, like you open a menu screen, it's just hot.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, right from the menu it grabs you with the burst of like
with
green flames
music?
Or whatever. I'm like, all right, I'm in. You have me by the balls. Let's go.
And I don't even want to jump into like the minutia of like the amount of things that we could like talk about on this front, like in the slick style and presentation, but like down to like little things that you wouldn't expect. The very first boss fight that you get to, the death animation is, I'm so obsessed with it. It like cuts to a black screen, and then it's a mask over the character model over like a like color palette that kind of matches theirs. And it's something that you probably won't even notice the first few times. And then when you do, I'm just like, it just looks so good. And it's like, it's a little thing that you see for like 2 seconds and then it's gone. And that is all throughout the game. You see that, like, from character designs to like, I just love Poseidon having his arms like over the trident slung over his back. Yeah.
And every time you get a new boon, like the weapon changes its design. Like if you get Poseidon, you have a water effect whenever you swing it. I think when you're pitter-pattering on the floor, there's like a fire footprint that you leave behind or something. That's really cool. Yeah. So much. So much.
One of the level designers like tweeted like how they designed the Barge of Death, and it was so freaking cool because it's like all smoke and mirrors, right? So like there's this level called the Barge of Death where you like get on this giant like floating rib cage, and it like travels basically an infinite distance while you're fighting this like one encounter, and then as soon as you finish the encounter at the same time, like the barge arrives at your destination. And I was like, that's kind of interesting that they like had this like continuous loop like based on how much time you're spending on the barge, and it ends at exactly the right time. How did they do that? And the level designer like tweeted how they did it, and basically your start destination and your end destination are like only like a few feet apart, but when you get on the Barge of Death in between, the game just cycles like the environment around the barge, and then you just, when you finish, it just goes boop like 1 foot over onto your destination. And I thought that was so clever.
That's really cool.
I love it.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, we kind of take for granted with the quality of games right now, like the amount of magic that people have to pull off with limited resources, especially for a game that has to run on like the Switch. So I would love to see something like, I know there's a series on YouTube called Boundary Break, where they kind of explore these things. I would love to see something like that with Hades, because I saw that tweet and I was fascinated. But on that front, just really quick, I want to touch on performance super quick, just how it ran for everyone on your particular systems.
I played on the PC, and It was perfect. I have not a single complaint. Except, okay, well, I think it was just me, like, button mashing, because, like, my sticky keys. That was it.
Well, I mean, you can turn that off.
I know, yeah. So, but, like, that's fine. So, yeah.
Yeah. Palazzo, you played on Switch, right?
I did, and it also ran perfectly. Very beautifully. I didn't run into any hitches at all. It was great. Very fluid. Very nice.
It ran really well for me on Switch as well. However, I will say there were points where, like, I remember as I progressed in the game, certain encounters, I was like, is the game mad that I'm getting better? Because I feel like it's throwing more enemies at me.
Yeah.
And there were a few points where, like, literally there was so much going on screen, particularly with the enemies that shoot out, like, waves of, like, particulates and stuff, that I did have some slowdowns on the Switch.
I was going to say, yeah, I also had frame rate issues, but I think I felt like I was more being punished for doing crazy things that I think maybe the game wasn't expecting us to do, right? It's like I guess I shouldn't have like especially like the witch's circle when they fire, it's like four to six like enemies that all fire like 30 energy balls at you at the same time, and it's like okay, the game threw this at me. I feel like it's not my fault if I like try to deflect all these, but if I try to deflect it, the game is like, whoa, slow down there, man. And I'm like, okay, hold on. Like, you threw this at me.
I ran into that same issues in that same part where I had deflect, and then I had one of the perks where with every attack, I would also shoot out additional projectiles. And so I think it was just the number of projectiles on screen at once. The game was like, no, wait, you're not supposed to do this.
Yeah. And also, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and also like damage calculation gets like really wonky at certain stages. Like, particularly I got to a part where like I can basically kill the bone hydra in like 15 seconds or less. But when you do that, the game gets like mad at you, so it'll shows like you've clearly done enough damage to kill the whole thing, but it'll be like, hold on, we still have this like mandatory phase for you, so we're gonna like actually cut off the damage at a certain stage, but then like the bar, like the health bar, like won't decrease in time, so like it'll like still show it at like full health, even though you know you've killed it. And now the boss is like on another phase, like throwing completely different attacks at you. That's
good to know, because I wasn't sure if those phases were required or not. I thought you could melt it if you're quick enough, and I just never was. But no, they force you to go through the other two phases. Gotcha.
Which is fine, but then I feel like the game shouldn't like get snagged on a thing that it like decided to do to me, you know?
Yeah,
I've had the same thing where like before the fight technically starts, like it's still like the opening animation. I start killing it, and you see like health bar goes down, and then it refills, and it like struggles for a second. It goes back and forth, and then it refills all the way up, and I'm like, all right, fine, have it your way.
And I cannot emphasize enough, like this is like the smallest little like thing to get upset about, but it's just like these are the things you notice when like everything else just is like runs like butter.
Yeah, and you know, also goes to show that like these are the things we're nitpicking being this small in a game where you're replaying the same thing over and over and over and over again for 140 hours, you know, like, so to say that we haven't run into more issues also, I guess, speaks to the game's quality. Lastly, or at least on my end, as far as the gameplay, like the last thing I was curious about was really for Toe, really having just kind of demolished the game at this point.
I inhaled it,
because once you complete the game the first time, it opens up new options that are meant to keep the game fresh, and like you said, you know, later on characters kind of encourage you to try new things and all of that. But did the gameplay, especially after beating, you know, whatever you consider to be the final ending, was there enough there to keep you engaged, or were you just doing it because at this point you're like, I'm so close to finishing it, I'm going to finish it? Or was it continually engaging? Did it maintain that sort of spark?
That's a good question. I would say my experience might not be the same as other people's, because after I had gotten like the true ending, or at least what I understand to be like the true ending, which like does not have a credits scene or anything associated with it, it's just like a resolution to the story.
Sure.
Essentially, I had not maxed everybody else's relationships just yet. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna like max out every keepsake, and then I'm also going to, you know, get all of Skelly's statues for the packs of punishment, and then I'm also gonna like max all of my relationships with like all of the NPCs. So that took a little bit more time, and then those all kind of like resolved in their own way, to the point where like now I am finally, again, I have to say 140 hours later, finally certain NPCs are repeating certain lines. So yeah, I will say like there is not a whole lot to do in the end game if you've done everything, but I feel like at the same time, like you could still enjoy it if you're a person who like enjoys that type of replayability. But like I did play it more for the story and for the character development, and again, there were some character developments that did not happen until like 100 hours in, so like that is still really good, especially compared to like previous Supergiant games, like Transistor, which is probably like my favorite game by them. Like I beat it in a night. Like I started at like 10 p.m, I beat it at like 5 a.m, and I was like, oh my god, this is the most incredible thing ever. So like this is like 10 to 20 times like more time consuming than any other game they've made, and it shows. So like I don't want to knock it for not having anything else to do, but I feel like, and I'm not even going to say like, I'm like, you know, there are people who put more into the game than I do. Like there are speedrunners, right, who are about beating the game in like under 8 minutes, whereas it takes me about maybe 12 to 15 minutes to do like a whole run. So like I could keep working at it if I wanted to, but like that's not enjoyable for me. But I think after doing everything, like I kind of felt like there was this like void inside me. It's like, oh my god, now what is there to do? Like I'm all out of like fun things. So
the game has a hard mode that you could do, right? Like a hell mode.
Yeah. So there's the. My understanding of the hell mode is that you turn up the difficulty all the way. Or you're talking about the if you die once thing. Are you talking about like a hardcore mode?
I saw it in the menu. It's an
There's
option.
like a god mode, which makes it easier for you.
Not that, the other one. I think it's called hell mode.
Okay, I'll have to go back and look at it. I might already have it turned on, or I might just like not have played it. But but it definitely doesn't give you any more content wise.
Gotcha.
So there's like the god mode, which basically makes you a little bit stronger every time you die, which I have not done, but could be good. Like I'm a fan of making games accessible for people in that way.
Absolutely.
It's nice. It's pretty sweet.
Have you been using it?
I off stream I had started like playing with it to see, but like today on stream, because I wanted to kind of like get through it real quick because I only had an hour, I turned it on. Cool. I turned it on. And
Notable difference or no?
It helps. You're more resistant to damage is basically what it is, and each every time you die, like you gain more damage resistance.
Gotcha.
So like right now, I'm at like 50% damage resistance.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah. So because I wanted to get to the true ending, so I'm probably gonna keep it on until I get to the true ending, just because, you know why.
So if you toggle it off, it keeps all your progress.
Yeah, you can
good.
turn it off and like then jump back a week later, and it's still.
That's really nice to know. That, you know, I'm sure that might assuage some worries for people who like might view a game like this to be kind of inaccessible.
Yeah. So.
My one piece of advice though is when you do finish it, do try turning off all of your like Mirror of Night talents, or try doing like least useful boon runs, because I think you will really surprise yourself that like at how much better you've gotten at a thing that you might not have noticed.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to try is to start a new game eventually when I get the true ending, and to see how far I could get now that I've played the game up until this point.
Smart.
You know, see how far I progressed.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything else? I feel like I kind of covered a lot of my main points.
Yeah, you guys touched on a lot.
Yeah, I feel like we did a great job actually covering this game. I mean, we have been talking for a while, but
I would love to just like off air have like a spoilerific conversation with y'all when you're like actually caught up, because there are so many other things I want to talk about, but I feel like this is like I feel like we did like a really encompassing overview of like gameplay, story, art direction, like all that stuff. So
yeah, definitely. All right, so in that case, I think we're ready for a vote. So, in the case of Hades, how do we vote? I'm sure you're going to be very shocked by the outcome of this vote, considering our effusive praise for the game. On my end, absolutely. I think you should buy it, though. For $25, the fact that you can get over 100 hours of engaging gameplay out of it alone just shows, like, the value that's there. And, if you know me at all and my tastes, like... This is a game that, not that it's a super hard sell, but is on the harder end of stuff for me to enjoy, and I had an absolute blast with it. Way more so than I expected. And I think that we kind of said that Spelunky might be like a fun entry point, especially for the price. Scrap that. If you want to try a roguelike game at all, unless you really want that local multiplayer, which is one of the things that seemed interesting there, I would say Hades. Hades absolutely has just a wonderful mixture. It is a concoction of game design and narrative and everything that makes this a really accessible entry for, I think, probably people who are seasoned in this category of games, as well as newcomers. So yeah, absolutely you should buy it, though, on my end.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just second that right there. Yeah, definitely buy it. I think it is as someone who has never played a roguelike or light game before, I think this was a great introduction, and I love Greek mythology, so that was a nice little bonus, and the voice acting is phenomenal. It's just so good. It's so good. I have really no complaints so buy it.
Yeah. I forgot this game was $25. I feel like if I had paid $60 for it, I still would have been just as happy. Like, it's worth it. In fact, I voted yes to buy Crash Bandicoot in like the last episode. Don't buy this game like twice. Buy this game twice.
How many games have y'all told people to buy? Because now maybe they're broke and now they can't get Hades.
I'm broke.
Oh no,
We are broke.
Yeah.
we're broke too.
I'm broke for you guys.
But yeah, everything in this game sort of comes together almost perfectly. The style, the music, voice acting, story, everything just connects beautifully to make this fantastic product, and it is in my top 3 games of the year, definitely. I don't think it's number 1 because I fell in love with Final Fantasy VII Remake, like really fell in love with that game.
Ooh,
but this game is solidly in my top 3 for sure. I love it. So yes, this is a buy, definitely.
I would say it's definitely a buy because, especially if you did like Final Fantasy VII, I feel like you can get the Twin Fists of Malphite and like live your like Tifa fantasy, which is like what I was doing the whole time. Because you can get a special that lets you do like the dolphin blow kick instead of the regular special. So what I would say is, yes, obviously, like my vote would be to buy it, but I think. If I can kind of like say kind of like a parallel point to that, I think even if it's not the type of game that you would buy, I think looking at kind of like the games that have come out this year, it is unquestionably like in a lot of conversations is like considered game of the year or like in the running for that. So if you're the kind of person who cares about like what is on the bleeding edge of like games that are coming out today in terms of like art direction and style and mechanics and voice acting and like what is like at the like front tier of that, I think it's a game worth looking at, like just like as kind of like a cultural touchstone of like what 2020 is at in terms of gaming. So that is like my argument for it. But I would actually like to ask, like, would you buy it based on kind of what the 4 of us have said?
I'm probably gonna buy it.
Hey.
Especially because it's like on the Switch. Like, I love those games where it's just like I don't have a lot of time or like I'm always busy. If you can beat it in like a loop of like 20 minutes or less and then you're still having a good time, like definitely.
TJ, I don't want to change your mind, but I'm just saying this game will have the opposite effect. It's not like a filler game. It's going to eat your life up.
Yeah.
But in the best way.
I mean, I also
You can
play
work your
games
way up
like
to
Binding of Isaac and Enter the Gungeon. So.
Yeah.
Oh, then actually you'll do just fine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so in the case of Hades, you should buy it, though.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yay! I will.
And TJ will. Kind of like you guys said, it's definitely in my top 3. My top 3 this year so far is such a weird mixture. It is this, Ghost of Tsushima, and Parkasaurus.
Oh my god.
Oh wow.
Not Doom Eternal? Wow.
I think for me, it's got to be, I would say like Hades number 1, like very close second is the latest update of No Man's Sky, which I do consider to be basically a new game.
Oh, I gotta hop in.
Yeah, 3.0 is like, this. It is really like a monumental achievement of just like game making that I think just like really deserves to be recognized. And I would say like a distant third is probably Animal Crossing, because I've put about 400 hours into it now, and it would be wrong to say that it's not in my top 3 if I've put several months of my actual life into it.
Fair.
Yeah. That's why before this, I played this game. Fall Guys was number 3 for me because I dumped so many hours into that. But this game blew that out of the water.
Yeah.
Like number 1 is Final Fantasy VII Remake, then Ghost of Tsushima, and then this game for sure.
Yeah.
Nicholas Palazzo, I made a Fall Guys D&D session for you.
And I
And
loved every second
you're telling
of
me
it.
we gotta do a
Hades session?
Yeah.
I have been telling him, I'm like,
I'm sorry.
I
I
want you to
actually
do
will
a
have
Greek
to invite
mythology
myself
one.
to that one if you do that. I'm so sorry.
I
will
would
be.
love to
I will
have
be
you.
literally angry at you if you do like a Hades themed. Can I just
You're
DM
gonna
it? I
kill
will
our
DM.
go-off
I
in
will
season
DM.
oh my
a
god, can you
Hades one.
DM? Toe, can you DM?
I
Please?
literally
Because John
love
doesn't
that
feel like he
ish.
knows enough about Greek mythology. So Toe, if you want to DM it, please.
I will.
I have a
freaking
very
do that.
surface theater level knowledge of mythology.
If
I
you're
don't have
okay
that
with like
deep well.
homebrewed boons and ish, I will absolutely do that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay. Sweet.
Okay, we'll continue this
Okay,
conversation.
sorry, that was very rude of me, but I was just like, I have to invite myself to this.
Stay
'cause I'll
tuned
be
for Dungeons and
angry if that
Dreamers.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
But thank you all so much for listening. Toe, where can people find you?
Oh, cool. Yeah, so people can find me. I'm very online. So they can, they can find me on Twitter at Tozaman, spelled at TAU, Z as in zebra, A, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy. I'm also the same thing on Instagram. I mostly post like about like other podcasting stuff. Oh, I make a podcast. That's probably the thing I should say. I make a podcast called Caravan. You can find it on at Caravan Radio. It's a podcast about the Wild West, bounty hunting, friendship, sex with demons, and also trying to get out of hell. And it is a huge labor of love. One of your favorite streamers here also happens to be like one of the main characters on it. That's actually how I met him. So you should give it a listen and find out who that is. Yeah, no, every second of working on it has been a gift, and especially just the fact that it allowed me to meet the rest of y'all was really special. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me here.
No, of course.
heck
Thank you for
yeah.
joining us. I think, thank you for bringing your expertise to the table and such thoughtful discussion on this wonderful game.
Oh, yes.
On that front, thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed what we do here and you're interested in checking us out, seeing where you can support us, we have links in the show notes for our Patreon, our Ko-fi, all of that. We want to give a very special thank you to patrons Jerry Benetatos and Ann Baird. Your support means quite a lot. And thank you to everyone listening. Times are tight. If you're looking for other ways to support the show, please consider sharing us with friends if you like what we do here, and or maybe leaving us a little review in the podcast app of your choice.
Or
Other than
subscribing
that-
to us on Twitch for free.
Also that, we stream. Amanda I think is going to continue streaming Hades still, so if you want to catch some more of that in the next few days, go check that out, twitch.tv/Whimsic Productions. But thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Toad, for being here. Thank you, Supergiant Games, for the gift that was Hades. And
Yes.
we will talk at you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
God damn it.